Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome. My name is Andrea Hamilton-Vaughan, and I'm the Events Chair for the Women in Road Safety Network of the Australasian College of Road Safety. I'm a Road Safety Officer in local government in the central west of New South Wales. Let me tell you a little bit about the Women in Road Safety Network. It is designed to connect and empower and celebrate women working across all areas of road safety through shared experiences, collaborative discussions, and practical insights. Today's webinar is inspired by the 4th Global Ministerial Conference on Road Safety that was held in Marrakech. Our panel of experts attended the conference, and they are Dr. Judy Charlton, Professor Emerita at Monash University, former Director of the Monash University Accident Research Centre, Chair of the National Road Safety Partnership. From iRAP, we have Ms. Judy Williams, the Global Program and Communications Manager, and Ms. Estiara Elliziar, the Youth Leadership Board at the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety in Indonesia. Unfortunately, Fatima Pereira de Silva can't join us from Portugal today because of illness, and we wish her a speedy recovery. But I'm really happy to announce that Ms. Melanie Venter, Principal Professional Leader from the National Transport Research Organisation, has stepped in. Thank you, Melanie. Last but certainly not least, our Dr. Ingrid Johnston, who's the CEO of the Australasian College of Road Safety, is our 4th member of the panel and who will lead the discussion and be moderator. I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional landowners of the land, past, present and emerging, and their ongoing connection with the land. I'd also like to take this little opportunity, because that's the kind of girl I am, to give a shout out for the Women in Road Safety workshop that will be held at our Road Safety Conference in Perth. I'm sure you would enjoy to be there, so if you're going to be there in Perth, please join our workshop. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Ingrid Johnston. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. So this is a bit of a rundown of what happened at the 4th Global Ministerial Conference on Road Safety, which was held from the 17th to the 20th of February in Marrakech, Morocco. So these ministerial conferences are run by the United Nations and the World Health Organization, and they only happen about every 5 years. So the first one was in November 2009 in Moscow. The second was in November 2015 in Brasilia. The third in February 2020 in Stockholm. And this was the 4th one. So it's the halfway point in our decade of action for road safety, an opportunity to do a bit of a check-in on progress. The theme for the conference was Commit to Life, and it had the aim to catalyse action to achieve the target of a 50% reduction in road deaths and serious injuries by 2030. The objectives of the conference were a bit of a stock-taking exercise of progress to date to identify successes and gaps that should be prioritised in the coming years, to generate learning from successes through the use of case studies, and also identify what hasn't worked, to provide a platform to connect with others working on related topics within the broader Sustainable Development Goal agenda, and so that there can be greater synergies achieved, to generate political support and empower those responsible for implementation to take action, and establish mechanisms to ensure greater accountability by relevant actors. There were many different sessions which focused on a huge variety of issues, such as implementation and governance, linking and leveraging the SDG agenda, emerging mobility trends, financing, private sector engagement, the burden of injuries and capturing injury data, a focus on Africa, enforcement, vehicle safety standards, and a panel of mayors talking about action in cities. There were also a lot of events happening around the conference. So there was a meeting of the Global Network of Heads of National Road Safety Agencies. That is a network which was launched in 2022. It had its first in-person meeting in June 2023, and I think this might have been just its second in-person meeting, and that was co-hosted by the Global Road Safety Facility and the World Health Organization. That meeting looked at things like assessing country progress and challenges in achieving global targets, enhancing the role of lead agencies in coordinating national efforts, harnessing innovative technology, defining the future scope and activities of the global network. There was also a closed ministerial roundtable. There was the 3rd World Youth Assembly for Road Safety, and we'll hear about that a bit more in a minute from Estiara. There was a film festival competition. The Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety held a symposium and also a side event on making safe helmets a reality for all. iRAP, the International Road Federation, and the World Road Congress hosted an event, 10 Steps to 2030 for Safer Road Infrastructure. And again, we'll hear a bit more about that from Judy in a moment. The ITF held a high-level roundtable on implementation of the SAFE system. The Multilateral Development Bank's Road Safety Working Group held a meeting, and the UN Secretary-General's Special Envoy for Road Safety group of advisors also held a meeting. So lots going on around the conference itself. For the 3rd conference in Stockholm, there was convened an academic expert group to make recommendations for advancing global road safety. And that group was convened again to make a report for the 4th conference, which was designed to build on the outcomes from Stockholm and aim to make tangible contribution to achieving the 2030 targets with universal recommendations that can be applied anywhere in the world. There were also lots of global reports that were released in conjunction with the conference. UNICEF and the World Health Organization released a global status report on child and adolescent road safety. The FIA Foundation released a report on financing and action on road safety. The ITF's new Safe System Tool Framework was released. The Global Alliance had a report on their mobility snapshots looking at intersection safety. There was an Africa status report on road safety. Each of the countries' government delegations were invited to make commitments to the conference on how they would accelerate action towards meeting their road safety targets. And 50 countries did that with new commitments made. There was also a declaration that came out of the conference, the Marrakech Declaration, which calls on governments to make road safety a political priority, ensure sustained financing, and advance actions to achieve targets. For safety to be a primary concern in all road infrastructure planning and related policies, laws, and regulations. For greater coordination across government ministries, including health, transport, and the environment. To adopt policies and infrastructure that advance safe, green, and equitable mobility, such as walking, cycling, and public transport. To recognise that safe and accessible mobility drives equitable economic growth across society. To increase cross-border knowledge sharing, technical support, and technology transfer. To advance research into emerging technologies, and to work with civil society organisations and academia. For the college, we held a meeting of our international outreach chapter at the conference, which was a fantastic and rare opportunity to actually meet in person members from all over the world. And we ended up with about a dozen new members in the weeks after the conference. So that was fantastic for the college as well. So I will now hand over to the other speakers on our panel to give their overview and their perspective of what they did at the conference and what their impressions were. And then we'll have some opportunity for questions and answers. So I would ask you please to put your questions into the Q&A. We do also have the chat function operating, but if you try to separate those two, so I will look at the Q&A specifically for when there are questions to the panel. Okay, and first I will hand over to Judy Williams. Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid, and thanks, Andrea, and hello, everybody. So as Ingrid said, I am the Global Program and Communications Manager from the International Road Assessment Program. So where we fit in is very much the infrastructure side of the SAFE system. So iRAP is a global charity with a vision for a world free of high-risk roads. So we work with countries, with their governments, their mobility clubs, with development banks, research organisations, industry and road safety NGOs, providing them with the free tools and training to make their roads safer. So recent training out of Johns Hopkins University has shown that our partners across the world using the methodology and tools have saved 700,000 lives and injuries since 2016. So it's very much a partnership success story. So in terms of what we did at the conference, we worked very closely with our global partners, with the UN Road Safety Collaboration as a member of that group, and also with the Global Advocacy group to help countries brief their ministers and engage them. So we very much helped them to understand the injury burden in their country, the state of their roads and what work was occurring there, where the priority interventions were needed, and how we could support them. Part of that work was, obviously we all come at the road safety picture from a different point, and we really work closely with global partners to try and identify the best contacts in countries to help support those ministers, who was working with the ministers to brief them and to engage them in the event. In terms of actually attending the Ministerial Marrakech, as Ingrid said, we ran the 10 Steps to 2030 for Safer Road Infrastructure side event for a full day. That was co-hosted with PRC and also with the International Road Federation. And that was very much looking at what is called the 10-step approach. So that has proven very successful in Tanzania to build capacity and outcomes for safer roads. We've also recently launched that 10-step approach in Senegal. And there's also projects that are occurring in Africa and also in the CARIC region, in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. With those projects, they're specifically looking at how to rewrite design standards for safer road design. So we help share what that 10-step plan is and its success in countries, and how any country can use that as a framework for action to make their roads safer. We also participated in about 7 different panel sessions and side events that our partners were coordinating. So for example, the World Youth Assembly with Estiara. We ran a Starting for Schools training, helping youth advocates learn how to make school journeys safer for young people. We also had focuses on powered two-wheelers, the safe system approach. We had been working with the International Transport Forum in the lead up to launch a safe system tool, so countries could and organisations could assess how they are progressing in terms of developing a safe system and actions for that. We also signed 5 MOUs, which is very important for continuing beyond the ministerial, the action that we were trying to engage. So one of those was with the International Development, Inter-American Development Bank, so IDB for Latin America. Also, we signed those with the National Road Safety Agency of Morocco, helping to build capacity. We also signed an MOU with the National Highways Association of Pakistan to develop a road assessment program there. And importantly, we have a very strong focus on wanting to make roads safer in Africa because, of course, they definitely suffer the burden of road trauma across our world. So we signed with the West Africa Road Safety Organization, WASO. So they represent 11 different countries across West Africa. and also with the Africa Road Maintenance Fund Association. So they represent 35 member countries, very much looking at the safety of road maintenance and how we can build capacity and programs that will make that safer. So we had a very busy time during that event in the lead up and ongoing beyond that. My impressions of the event was it was fantastic. The lead up was a little challenging, but on the day and the week it was fantastic. Excellent collaboration. I think the real win of these ministerial conferences is it engages the world and countries at a very high level to sort of put them on notice, to have to benchmark where they are at and to really commit to where they're going. So of course the purpose of the ministerial was we're halfway through the decade of action for road safety. We have a goal to halve road deaths and serious injuries. And so we're at the midway point. So it was very much for countries to look at where they're at and to make smart commitments, actionable commitments with a time-based focus that were very specific, that could be measured when we get to 2030. So I think really in terms of the commitments, they, as Ingrid said, 50 countries made commitments, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about those as we go. But it was good to see those commitments being made. And on the website, the World Health Organization asked for additional commitments, and I believe they will publish those very soon.
Great. Thank you very much, Judy. Now, can I pass to Estiara, please? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. It's been an honor to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Estiara Elliziar. I'm part of the Youth Leadership Board member at the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety. It is a global road safety movement that united the individual youth and organizations for road safety and sustainable mobility. We now have more than 2,000 members from 129 countries. And my journey at the Global Ministerial Conference in Marrakech started a little bit earlier than others, because 2 days before the main conference, I had the privilege to take part in the Third World Youth Assembly on Road Safety as the Global Youth Mobility Ambassador, which brought together over 150 youth leaders from 49 countries. And interestingly, 52% of the delegates were women. And this was not just a warm-up event, it was an official side event of the Ministerial Conference and a powerful platform where young people led the conversations on what the future of safe and sustainable mobility should look like. So over the 2 full days, we engaged in high-impact discussions, participated in expert-led sessions, and most importantly, we launched the Global Youth Statement for Road Safety, where it's more than just a document. It is a commitment from young people. It is a call to action and a turning point of how the world approaches road safety. And in the assembly, what stood out immediately was the energy, the diversity of the perspective. We shared the same urgency among us, where we came from different parts of the world, but the same urgency was safe roads should not be a privilege, they should be a right. And personally, being surrounded by so many passionate young leaders reminded me of the real power of youth. When we are given the platform to lead and collaborate, we can do it together. And we didn't stop at the assembly. We also participated in the main ministerial conference. If you attended the conference, you could spot us easily. We were the ones with those bright and the colorful hoodies, filling the youth pavilion, taking the stage, asking the bold questions, and engaging with the high-level discussions with ministers, UN officials, and civil society leaders. Through our participations, 32 bilateral meetings were held with the national government representatives, enabling youth leaders to advocate for adopting the Global Youth Statement at the national level. And 4 youth delegates and 2 youth staff were featured as the speaker in the ministerial plenaries, some thematic sessions, and the closing ceremony, bringing youth perspective into traditionally adult spaces. So we were everywhere presenting the Global Youth Statement, securing the endorsement. And because we know that to truly achieve the 2030 target of halving the road traffic deaths, youth can't be just participants. We need to be partners in every process. So for me, Marrakech was more than a conference. It was a new milestone in road safety efforts. It was a moment where we didn't just raise our voices, but we raised the standard of what youth engagement in road safety can look like. And I believe it set the tone for what's to come and for the better results. Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you. And yes, those brightly coloured hoodies were just absolutely genius. Everywhere you looked, there was youth in your face. It was fantastic. Melanie, I'll hand over to you now. Thanks.
Thank you, Ingrid and Estiara for just going for me. So I am working for the NTRO in Australia, and that stands for the National Transport Research Organisation. So I represented NTRO at this global conference in Marrakech, and we work mainly in Australia and New Zealand, but also globally for other countries, partnering often with iRAP and government, as well as councils and private entities, mainly focused on transport-related research. So we were very interested to see what's happening globally and how things are starting to turn around. Personally, for me, what was a bit of a wake-up call and quite insightful was there are only 7 countries that's on track to halve road deaths by 2030, and they were Iceland, Poland, Korea, Hungary, and Japan. And also, just get the other 2 for you. Anyway, guys, I'll get back to that. But what's now an issue for us, obviously, is working in Australia, we are not on that list, and we need to identify how we can improve road deaths in our country and how we can also commit to reaching this goal. Then next, why this conference was also very good for me and very interesting, is because I'm also South African, which kind of made it easier to navigate my ways in the northern bit of Africa. But what was also quite confronting for me was in terms of the safe system, there's definitely very big gaps and shortcomings still in Africa. And for those of you who are based in Africa or intimately aware of how things are going in Africa, it's very varied. It really ranges from exceptionally poor people to also affluent people, and that's also why it's very difficult to change things. But if you just look at those 4 pillars of the safe system being infrastructure related, or vehicles, or speeds, or driver behavior, all 4 of them lack attention and really need policy, confirmation, and commitment from all those countries. And the wonderful opportunity at this conference was to host it on African soil, which was really part of the magic and the vibe and everything that was happening at this conference. There were also 5,000 people attending this conference, which was mind-blowing. So very good involvement, very good participation. The other thing that struck my mind was that often all these things can get traced back to a lack of data. As you all know, if we don't have solid data to start with, we cannot have a good end result. So how can we help these countries to improve the data they capture, and then everything following on that? And then to just end off my intro, in terms of what I came back with to Australia was we need to look at what's the next step for Australia and how we can also get our trend to decrease again. We are currently working on a few initiatives, and one of them includes focusing on getting blameless crash investigations happening in Australia. And we are sitting down with a few states at the moment to talk through that. That's all from me. Thanks, Ingrid.
Thanks very much, Melanie. And finally, Jude. Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid, and lovely to be here. It was truly an honour and a privilege to participate in the Marrakech conference, and really to hear from governments and other road safety experts about the progress towards the 2030 targets. We heard, of course, that progress has been quite slow. In fact, I think just a 5% reduction in fatalities in this decade so far, or actually since 2010. So progress is really modest, and that made the conference all the more important to share what has worked for various countries and organisations, and where do we need to go next? Where do we need to invest our efforts next? For me, as someone who spends a fair bit of time with the National Road Safety Partnership Program, which is all about workplace road safety, I was really delighted in what I saw as a really strong emphasis at this conference, and that was that governments really can't achieve those 2030 targets alone. So the emphasis is really on, well, how can we maximise government efforts by combining with other organisations. So the key was bringing those organisations, and I think a lot of effort was invested in making sure that organisations shared the platform at this conference. And by organisations was meant non-government organisations. It was a very, very strong presence. The Global Alliance of Youth was a very strong presence. Cities were a much stronger presence than they have been previously. And importantly, industries, corporations, workplaces were present at this meeting like they had not been so much at the Stockholm conference, which I also had the privilege to attend 5 years previously. I think at the Stockholm conference, the emphasis was considerably more on thinking about road safety now in the context of the UN SDGs, and that connection and the leverage that can be gained from thinking about road safety not only as a sole endeavour, but how can we link with health endeavours, equity endeavours, inclusion and environmental sustainability endeavours to maximise achievements for road safety. I thought the academic expert group who prepared a report and a number of recommendations in the lead up to the conference did a really good job in explaining why organisations are really a key to achieving SDG targets for road safety. What they were able to identify was that somewhere around 400,000 of global fatalities, road fatalities, are occupational in nature. So they were workplace related road deaths. And that estimate didn't include commuting to and from work. So at the very least, it's somewhere around a third of all global fatalities are work related. And so if we can work with employers, can work with companies and their employees, then we stand to make a very big impact if we get the formula right. Employers are bound by occupational health and safety regulations. So that was one reason. Another reason why the academic expert group had singled out organisations, because employers have a responsibility to look after their workers, not just behind a desk, but when they are driving for work. They're also important, organisations also important because responsibilities for workers doesn't stop at the gate, so to speak. So the responsibility can also include contractors that are employed or contracted by organisations. So you get this kind of multiplying effect by thinking about the workplace in its very broadest sense. So I was pretty impressed with that. I was impressed with the number of organisations that spoke and that had a front and centre place at the conference, and talked about what they are doing for 2030 targets. Just some other highlights that I took away from the conference. The voice of trauma victims was also front and centre stage. In fact, the conference began with a minute's silence and then a very powerful speaker who was a trauma victim spoke about her endeavours in changing government thinking and changing government priorities for road safety. For me, the voice of NGOs and the voice of the Global Youth Alliance was very powerful too. And I think takeout messages from both were less talk, more action, and let's go for results, not intentions. The voices of cities was very impressive too. The Mayor of Paris, the Mayor of New York City and others spoke about the role of urban planning and what they can do in that space to improve road safety. I might leave it there. Thanks, Ingrid, and we'll come back with other reflections later, perhaps. Thanks.
Thanks very much. And thanks to all of our speakers for that overview. So now we'll move into a Q&A. So if all the speakers would like to turn their cameras back on, and for everyone in the audience, please put your questions into the Q&A and we'll work our way through as many of them as we can. To get us started, the Marrakech Declaration calls on governments to make road safety a political priority, to ensure sustainable funding, and to advance actions to achieve the 2030 targets. To all of the panelists, really, what do you see as the most important things that are in the declaration for being able to make more progress on road safety? Who would like to jump in? Judy.
I can start. Sure, Ingrid, thank you. I think a big part of the declaration was very much about making road safety a political priority and ensuring sustainable funding to advance action. So I think one of the key important things in the declaration to see success is going to be financing, sustainable financing. Also action that's based on evidence and best practice that can be shared from other partners around the world and adopted. And also that celebrating success. I think when we can share the success of countries and the success of other states, for example, in programs that they're running, it encourages the adoption further. So certainly some of the key things that were there in terms of safer road infrastructure was aligning national infrastructure standards to global standards. And we're seeing that in Australia with the current ACRS and AAA supported push for My Safety Counts, which is lobbying for the inclusion of star ratings. So the understanding of how safe our roads are and ensuring that data is informing funding, that is going to be critical. So it's a wonderful thing that Australia is doing that is very much picking up on that part of the declaration. Also, speed was a focus in the declaration, and that's essential because speed is something that doesn't cost countries. So you can make the safety of a road immediately better by simply slowing the traffic down without any kind of infrastructure changes at all. So that is certainly a key one. Technology and data, there's so much potential there for us not only being able to identify more quickly safety issues, but also being able to share that data and gather it and transmit it much more quickly. And supporting low and middle income countries, I think, is going to be critical because, as we know, the road safety burden is great in those countries and they also lack the resourcing. So the work that all of us do cumulatively to build capacity in low and middle income countries, to also take consultancy work into countries to help them run their own projects and build capacity so that when international organizations leave, those local partners are ready to go and to continue. That's very, very important.
Thanks, Judy. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I think I will jump. I think Judy already covered almost the thing from the Marrakech declarations. And yes, I agree. It was powerful because it didn't just call for actions, but also calling for a political will, sustainable funding, and accountability. And from the youth perspective, it's really aligned to our demand on the Global Youth Statement for Safety, where we also call to actions in 3 critical areas. The first one is the invest in youth solutions, where the government and stakeholders must fund youth-led initiatives to tackling the speed reduction, helmet use, safe infrastructures, and sustainable transport, where young people are already implementing solutions. So it is the time to scale them up with a proper investment. And the second one, team up across the generations. Road safety is not a youth issue, it is a global issue. When young leaders bring their energy and live experience to the table alongside the policymakers and experts, we create safer solutions that also save lives. And the third one is the accountability matters, that young people must be active decision makers, not a passive participants, because we can't just be a participant. We need to be part into the decision-making processes. So government must establish strong accountability frameworks that allow youth to track the progress, monitor the commitments, and hold decision makers responsible for real change. So I think the words are already there. Now it's about turning them into action and accountability. Thank you.
Thanks, Estiara. Melanie.
Ingrid, I just have 2 things to add to that one. Something that I think is also happening more and more is safety and design, where we don't only look reactively doing road safety audits and so forth. It's actually when we design, then already have an idea how safe it's going to be. And that's something that I know iRAP is pushing, and consultants as well. And the other thing, which was also, I think, important, that countries are pledging for, but we need to remember, is with the mass amount of data available, if we want a targeted approach, and this is for academia, NGOs, governments, it's very important to understand exactly what data we need and how to interpret that data. Because sometimes you can manipulate the data to tell you what you want it to, but then it's not applied in sense actually for the good of road safety.
Absolutely. Thank you. As Jude mentioned, the academic expert group recommendations focused very heavily on workplace safety and organisational safety culture to move past responsibility for road safety being delegated primarily and exclusively to governments. So what do you think needs to happen to achieve this shift in focus? Are organisations ready for it and willing to take on that role? Jude, maybe we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, sure. Well, several things to say about this. I think, one key is that governments need to first recognise that that private-public partnerships can actually play a role. It would be great if that recognition was actually stated in national road safety strategies. We're fortunate in Australia that it does. It recognises the role of organisations and workplaces. So I think it's probably mixed answer on this, Ingrid. I think some countries may be very ready, some governments may be very ready, and have already recognised that. And several of the ministers who made commitments during the conference mentioned the role of organisations in achieving targets. But it won't be front of mind for all organisations either. So I think there's a role to play in sort of lifting the profile of safety and road safety amongst organisations, so that this can really make a difference. And I think I mentioned the strategic plans of organisations. So I think we actually need to have specific targets around workplace safety written into strategic plans. And as others have said in response to the last question, we then need to hold organisations accountable. To do that, you need to monitor progress towards those targets, and to help organisations benchmark too. I think in many respects, organisations don't have good tools, so providing resources in the form of tools that help them to monitor their safety records would be something that would be helpful.
Thanks, Jude. Anyone else on that one?
Yeah, Ingrid,
Judy.
I can share something here. So something that occurred at the conference was the FIA Road Safety Index was launched. So what that is, it's a initiative of the FIA where they have approached organisations to assess and measure the road safety footprint right down their chain. So there were a number of 9 actual companies that were awarded the highest rating. So it was Amazon, Uber, Waymo, IKEA, Honda, Scania, Shell, Battitalia, and Folksam. So the interesting thing about those is for someone like IKEA, for example, their core business isn't road safety. And in fact, they have no control over the chain of transport operators that help support their business, but they have prioritized road safety to ensure that that is embedded in throughout their train. So that was something very interesting. And I know that the FIA are looking at increasing that. It's currently a 3-star rating and increasing that to a 5-star rating in the years ahead. We partner with NETS, the network of employers for traffic safety. They're based out of the US, and we did a survey of their membership, which showed that 90% of their members, who are all companies that have a large fleet base, were certainly very supportive and keen for information that would help them to assess the road safety and improve the road safety of their employee network. So some of the things that we have been working with them on, we work with companies to help them understand which roads are safer, and that also informs the mode choice of travel. So for example, we might work with mining companies to assess the roads that they are most frequently transporting their mining materials down, and we'll assess the safety and develop safer road investment plans with them so that they can inform upgrades specifically on those roads to improve the safety of their staff. Something else that we are working on, and Australia's actually a leader in this field, is the iRAP initiative. So what that is using AI and artificial intelligence, LiDAR technology, a whole range of different data sources, bringing them together to more automate and very quickly assess the safety of road infrastructure. So in Australia, Andrea has been a key player in this. So they have assessed the entire WA state road network of some 20,000 kilometres. There's also assessments that have occurred in New South Wales, and also a 6,000 kilometre assessment that's occurring in Queensland. So that is going to be very important for making that the results of road safety assessments on infrastructure much quicker to enable very targeted evidence-based upgrades to be delivered more quickly. So they're just some of the things that impact the fleet operators. It's certainly a very crucial part of their bottom line in a range of ways when road safety isn't improved for them.
Great, thanks, Judy. Anyone else? Okay. The countries that were invited to make commitments about how they would improve their progress to achieving 2030 targets. And we know that there were about 50 countries who took up that opportunity. And I thought it was very interesting to see the range of countries who chose to do that, and in terms of the commitments that they made. So for example, Sweden committed to capacity building and knowledge sharing. The United Kingdom committed to its first national road safety strategy in over a decade. Bangladesh committed to enacting their first national road safety law. Colombia committed to ensuring more cities have speed limits of 50 kilometres per hour and 30 kilometres per hour. And Côte d'Ivoire committed to increasing helmet wearing among motorcyclists to 90% by 2027. So to everyone on the panel, what did you think of the commitments that were being made? Did your country make a commitment? Who would like to jump in?
I can jump in. But I'm keen to hear from others too. My initial impression was that it was rather underwhelming. In an overall sense. Although, Ingrid, you've just highlighted some really fantastic initiatives from different countries, and I did write down some other really positive ones as well. The Czech Republic talked about emphasising youth safety, and I think they have reasonably recently brought in an L17 program, which I assume is, I don't know the detail, but a graduated driver licensing system in part. And they talked about the reductions already made, and they wanted to invest in that in the future. And I thought that was a really tremendous commitment. Portugal also, I thought, had a really strong commitment, and they talked about a new road safety strategy that they were about to launch. They talked about 30-kilometre zones that they were going to push out, the separation of road users, and sharing of data and interdisciplinary analysis of their data to get better value from what they already have. So there were some real wins. I thought some of the country statements were really impressive, but a number were missing in action, and that's always a disappointment. To my knowledge, Australia hasn't made a commitment, but correct me if I'm wrong, it has?
No, we have not.
No. Up until last time I looked, we had not. And so one thing that the Global Alliance of NGOs encourages us to do is to do follow-up with our governments. If they did make a commitment, then congratulate them. If they didn't, well, let's be in touch. Let's question them, advise them, help them. There may be particular reasons why the public statement wasn't made, but for us who work in road safety and who are passionate about road safety, I have to say that was a disappointment for me.
Something else I can share as well. So the Global Alliance of NGOs did an analysis of the commitments made. And generally, I think they supported your view, Jude, which was they felt that the commitments made were often lacking the evidence base and also a time-based action that needed to be achieved. An adequate focus on evidence base. 80% of countries didn't mention dedicated funding. NGOs, who we know are a very important stakeholder, working with governments, were overlooked this time compared to the Stockholm Declaration. And so certainly many countries did make commitments pertaining to roads, safer school zones, active travel and pedestrian facilities, but they could have been improved with stronger weight. In terms of Australia, no, there wasn't a commitment, but what we did at iRAP in partnership with the International Road Federation and also with the FI Foundation, we launched a Safer Roads Pledge campaign. It was a global campaign calling on design agencies and governments and funding organisations that fund making road infrastructure safer, asking them to make a commitment to very strong, actionable commitments. So including star ratings, risk mapping, and doing road safety audits to ensure that they understood the safety of their network and made sure that financing was spent in the best possible way to maximise lives saved. So as part of that, we actually had 189 pledges made in 64 countries. And in the Australian context, the ACRS and Austroads and also NTRO made a pledge at the last ARSC conference, which was wonderful to see. And as part of that, obviously, we know Austroads represents all of the government road agencies at all levels. And also there were another 10 organisations from Australia that signed up to that. So they represent all sorts of fields, from the research arena to the road design agency to the consultancy networks. So there certainly is a strong commitment within the Australian sector and from the ACRS signing up to that pledge. So the commitment is there, but unfortunately, as you know, we are in a large campaign at the moment to just secure that at a government level.
Thanks, Judy. Melanie, Estiara, did you have any thoughts on the commitments? Estiara.
Yeah, not only Australia didn't make any commitment, but unfortunately there is no one coming from my country, Indonesia, due to kind of like a budget issue, something like that. But those commitments, I think, yeah, it was a very positive steps, and it's very encouraging to see countries addressing different aspects of road safety and giving a perspective in the youth. As we launched the Global Youth Statement, we also had a bilateral meeting with some countries, and 14 of official country delegations formally endorsed our statement, including the Dominican Republic, Kenya, Tunisia, Ecuador, India, Nigeria, Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Peru, Canada, Italy, Cyprus, Mauritius, and Mexico, where they strongly express their commitment to work with youth, this is something that we need, because we know that the young people are the most affected victims on road safety. And I really want to see the commitments that they are committed to work with road safety, to work with the young people. So from today and in the years to come, the statement is being used by the youth worldwide to engage in policy dialogues with the government, lead the community campaign and workshop, design and suggest the cost-effective and evidence-based solutions to address road safety challenges. So I really look forward to see many countries that will open the table to work with the young people there. Thank you.
Thank you. Melanie.
Ingrid, from a South African perspective, I'm definitely seeing more and more happening in the road safety field. If I think back 20 years ago, road safety audit was sort of checklist, so we've really advanced in that whole area to look at more safer schools and projects that the National Road Authority launched. Yet again, I didn't see as many pictures as I was hoping to, aligning with what Jude just said previously. One commitment that really struck my mind was when those countries that's en route to half-road deaths, and Belgium and Czechia dropping off my list earlier, Czechia committed to analyse crashes for all injury crash types and not only FSIs. And that was really something I've never heard before. So that commitment really struck a beat with me.
Fantastic, thanks. So a few people have mentioned the involvement of NGOs at the conference. How did you see that working? Did you see governments working in collaboration with NGOs? Who'd like to speak to that?
I can answer to that one if you like, Ingrid. So the Global Alliance of NGOs are an incredibly proactive organisation, and we saw them work very strongly in the lead up, during and post conference. So some of the things they were doing in the lead up with governments, they supported the World Health Organization and NASA in coordinating the event. They assisted in hosting regional planning meetings. So in Africa and in Latin America, for example, they hosted meetings which would draw together stakeholders in those regions ahead of the meeting to try and support that engagement. Not only for the ministers, but also for the stakeholders there that would be working to try and engage those ministers to action. They also worked very heavily with coordinating those lead agencies and their engagement. During the event, 65 different alliance members were represented, 10 different ministers attended their booth, and they ran 9 different events for NGOs with 350 attendees. So that was great to see. And then after that, they have produced what I mentioned, that NGO analysis, which was looking at 2 things. First, it was looking at the commitments made, but then secondly, they also looked at comparing the Marrakech Declaration to the Stockholm Declaration, which is, of course, the actionable piece of the document that comes from the events. And as part of that, I think that has been highly valuable in summarising. So they watched every single country's commitment and they recorded it. So that is very valuable work to help us all see now with transparency where countries have made a commitment, but also the countries that didn't, so we can help to support them further. So that was great to see, really. I think that's probably the main things I would say about NGOs. Very, very valuable in all countries of the world.
Thanks, Judy. Anyone else?
I just wanted to support what Judy's just described and encourage people, if you're interested to know more about what the Global Alliance for NGOs has done in that analysis, jump on their website. It's fairly easy to locate, but you know, I would really commend what they did do. It was a very systematic, evidence-based approach to analysing, you know, what change has been observed from 2020 to 2025. And also to commend their leader, Lotta Brondum. She was a really powerful force throughout the 4 or 5 days of the conference. She hosted a workshop, a full-day workshop, which featured the activities and achievements of various organisations. So they have an excellent leader in Lottie, and what they've produced in analysing the conference and the commitments, I think is really valuable. I commend people to have a read through that in detail.
Absolutely. Estiara, in the Youth Assembly, was there good representation and incorporation of the NGO sector?
Yes, definitely. We have 15 parallel sessions where most of them are NGO filling out, like one of them is iRAP to explore about the education and road safety with the iRAP starting for schools. And there are some from the, you know, so many like from the Abertis, the GDCI, NECTO, and many other NGO that helping us with this, like the World 21, the UN Habitat, the George Institute. So we have the 15 sessions range from the different SDG, the sustainable cities, gender, safe roads, and the road safety in the climate action, and also the education for road safety. And the second day, it's more deep with the land use planning, multimodal transport, and even the financing on road safety. We got support from the UNRSF, AMEN, Global Health Advocacy Incubator, and it's really helped us to give the delegates the full knowledge about like how road safety connect sector to support us in our advocacy effort. And yeah, that's how NGO supported us. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have a question from Tendakai in the audience. What would be the best way to follow up on the country commitments from an NGO perspective? And Judy, you mentioned a little bit about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for people within their countries to approach their ministers to draw on the evidence that is known about the country. So, for example, iRAP has the Safety Insights Explorer. You can find that on our website, which shows the injury burden of road crashes, also how safe roads are, but also that how many lives and injuries can be saved with what economic benefit by 2030. So I think, you know, look at the data in your country, what it tells us, and just advocate for safety. Draw to the attention the other countries that are world leaders and best practice, and share great case studies that are occurring, and just continue that advocacy beyond. It doesn't need to stop at the ministerial, it can continue way longer. And I think too, just draw on other collaborations. I think road safety is very much a multi-stakeholder work that we need to operate in. So, you know, I think all getting together, making sure we're all singing from the same song sheet, and that we're doing approaches in a coordinated way, but from different angles. That's also very important.
Absolutely. Thanks, Judy. This was the first time that the global conference had been held in Africa, and certainly from a college perspective, we have seen a lot of momentum across the African continent in the last kind of 12 months around road safety. I'm wondering if you saw that and how you see that progressing, arising from the conference having been held there. Melanie, maybe to start?
Yeah, I think I'll probably be quick to give other people also a chance time-wise. Definitely when I was there, I was so surprised about the people that was at the conference, and obviously they realize you from Africa and they're from Africa, and we start to discuss what their countries are doing and how I must really say the passion is growing. About 20 years ago, road safety was still very much a subset of the transport engineering related field, but lately it's really coming in its own right as a discipline, and there's so many more professionals that's involved in this field and really only working in this. So definitely seeing a lot coming from that, but that's, I guess, a bit from the South African context, also from along Northern Africa, Central Africa, all those regions, also what was pledged on the day before the conference started with the iRAP 10 Steps Day, all those countries that's coming up to the surface now and pledging. Definitely great, yeah.
Thank you, Melanie. Judy, what about from an iRAP perspective? Do you see a lot of momentum building in Africa?
Yeah, definitely. So as part of the conference, the SSATP released a report, which is really looking at the status of the safe system approach being delivered in the continent. So it's showing that Africa is disproportionately suffering from road traffic crashes, as we know. So they're accounting for about 24% of global fatalities, even though they have less than 4% of the vehicle compared to other countries of the world. So it is a big problem. It's definitely a focus of all global stakeholders trying to improve that. And we are very much working together with all the different stakeholders, so the development banks, as well as the different agencies, to see how we can work together. So in the lead up to the ministerial, we released a report on the key framework for implementation success. So looking at how different agencies have worked together to go from identifying road safety issue to actually delivering a life-saving outcome. And that report published some of the case studies from that, so we could learn from others what was best practice to see it all the way through. In terms of Africa for road infrastructure, we're helping to support capacity building and road assessments to influence safety in 45 countries. I mentioned those 2 MOUs that we've signed with the West African Association, also with AMFA for road maintenance. So there's a great deal going on, and so far 42 countries have done capacity building in how to make their roads safer. And the road assessments there are influencing about $5.2 billion of investment. So we know that achieving target 4, which is for increasing the amount of travel so that most travel is occurring on roads that are achieving that minimum 3-star safety rating. If they can achieve that in Africa, they stand to save over 98,000 lives every year with an economic benefit of $52.4 billion US. So it is an enormously important thing for not just the communities of Africa, but also the economies of Africa.
Thanks. This is one that might be for you, Jude. Given that you were in Stockholm as well as this conference in Marrakech, what do you see as the differences, both in terms of who was there and how the conference ran, but also in the lead up and the aftermath?
Yeah, I mentioned a couple of differences in the opening introduction, particularly for me, the 2020 Stockholm conference was a real emphasis on connecting health with transport, with environmental sustainability and social benefits, and how we can leverage what we need to do in road safety by connecting with our, I guess, ministers of various other, responsible for various other sectors to make those gains. After all, road safety has incredible impacts on all of those other areas, and that they may be messages that are not necessarily front and centre of minds of ministers of those other sectors. So that's very much what I saw emphasis in Stockholm. I also remember an emphasis in Stockholm on vehicle safety and the inequity of vehicle safety across high-income countries versus low-income countries, and particularly there's an emphasis on the lack of ethics around selling vehicles into Africa, in particular, that did not meet safety standards. That didn't come across as much. Maybe we've moved on from there.Maybe there's been a lot of achievement in that area. But as I said earlier, I think very much the emphasis at the Marrakech conference was on how can governments work together with organisations. We can't do it alone. It was also an emphasis on how can we be more financially sustainable? And one of the ways that you can do that is to harness the energy and the opportunities that are available through organisations, both commercial organisations and non-government organisations. So for me, they were standout differences in the two. And I think to sort of support what I'm saying about that emphasis on organisations, there was far more presence of industry people on the podium at Marrakech. So we were interested in what are businesses doing? What are you doing to prioritise safety? We heard a lot from them about technologies. And trying to improve safety culture within their organisations. In fact, there was a whole session. I can't remember all of the people on the stage, but one of them was the CEO of an organisation that's much like what the NRSPP does in Australia, the NETS organisation. I think you mentioned, Judy, earlier on, which is an organisation for employers in the transport sector. They have a very powerful influence over what employers are responsible for in the United States. So it was very interesting to hear from people like that who are very influential in this sector.
Thanks, Jude. We know that road safety efforts are under threat politically at the moment around the world. First of all, where have you noticed this happening and what are the impacts? But also, how can we galvanise political will and support? Who would like to jump in on that one?
I can speak to that one if you like, Ingrid. So one thing we're really seeing, as we'll all be aware of, is the Trump effect. So we are not immune to that in any country. So what some of those policies that President Trump has brought in has meant is that withdrawal immediately overnight of aid funding to countries, which has very much affected road safety projects, and also research grants. We've seen some of that media here in Australia where research grant funding has ceased overnight, which is going to affect where we go with our research in Australia for the short term. Certainly something else we're seeing is a removal of key words from organisational policies and funding specifications. So interestingly, words like climate change, diversity, media have been removed as a result of that sort of change in the US political system. I think the reality is that changes in government are always going to lead in fluctuations in our progress. And I think the key thing that we need to do is just to continue to work together as stakeholders, always drawing back to that evidence base, always staying committed to that shared song sheet and working together to support governments to make the decisions that they need to make and ensure that their actions are being supported by the data.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. Melanie or Estiara?
Yeah, I think I'm echoing what Judy is saying. Like in some countries, especially also in Indonesia, we have the new president and some of the budgets are being cut, including the road safety, and somehow like the government are shifting the intentions to other priorities from the road safety to the other different political priorities. And there's a tendency to see that road safety as a technical issue rather than a human rights and equity issue. And how we can keep going is, working with all the stakeholders that we can, and especially by the Youth for Road Safety, yours, we are now trying to working with the cities to establish the youth in city council. So we are trying to establish the permanent seat for the youth. So the first year will be giving the fund from the yours, but the second year we hope that the city can funding by themselves. So this objective of the program is to demonstrate the value of youth having a meaningful contribution to local policy discussions by establishing the formal structures to participate in the political and decision policy making in the city. So we hope that what we can do is we are trying to do our best to show our potential, and trying to get some funding from the different stakeholders instead of the government itself, but trying to see and leading by the example how youth can work and drive for a meaningful impact.
Thank you. Melanie.
Thanks, Ingrid. With us working in New Zealand and Australia, we've definitely seen a few changes. And I think the best we are trying to do is wherever there's a new person in government that's advocating for road safety and that needs an organisation to partner with, we try and embed ourselves in that situation. If I think of in Queensland, the federal government is going to provide funding to uplift Bruce Highway and to improve safety. In Queensland, as you all know, it's a long road, or for those of you who are not based in Australia, it stretches through the whole of Queensland from north to south. And I think in New Zealand, we also lately saw a big change in government, which really affected lots of government institutions and bodies. But one thing we did notice was we did see an interesting request come through the coroner's office. That's also more interested in determining why fatal crashes occurred. And there are also a bit of grant funding available in New Zealand. So we are trying to assist where it is possible to make an impact. Unfortunately, it's not very predictable, and transport is quite politicized in some countries. But that's the approach we're following.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience, from Tasha. Was there consideration of the extent to which road safety should consider gender perspectives, gender-based policy considerations? Who went to any sessions or heard any discussions along those lines?
Something I can maybe add from a gender perspective is not necessarily, it's a bit more general than specific related to the conference, but we've been tasked in the past to do a gender assessment toolkit for a body outside government in Australia that provides road infrastructure. So that was a first for us, and we looked at a lot of research done in Victoria mainly, and then as a result of that, we developed a toolkit that would be used by them for every time they erect a new piece of infrastructure that's supposed to look at gender, but then also other aspects as well, not only gender, but also all kinds of things that makes people a bit more vulnerable.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can speak to this as well a little bit. So I'm not sure on the composition of the delegates at the Marrakech conference. It certainly looked very balanced. There was a wonderful balance of both men and women at the conference. And in terms of the speakers on the program, in our field of engineering, it tends to be a little bit more male dominated, but we work really hard to try and build that female representation. So we offer training grants to female engineers to increase their participation. Certainly gender did appear in the conference. So one of the focuses of the conference program was gender responsive mobility. So we know that women tend to travel at different times and on different transport modes based on sort of family commitments. They are more likely to walk, and they're more likely to access public transport. We also know that women face more harassment and safety concerns on transport. So that was something that was raised, and very much looking at how policy changes and women's leadership can help to influence those impacts to make sure women are being brought along and their considerations are central to decision-making and road safety.
Great, thank you. Jude?
Yeah, I agree. I think there was a real presence of both men and women, and I didn't count numbers, but it appeared to be quite equitable across the main sessions, and some of the satellite sessions as well. So I think in that sense we were hearing the voices of women equally strongly as those of the male counterparts. There really were some standout women on stage, including the two facilitators, one Swede, I believe, and the other was a local woman, I think, from Morocco. Is that right? They were amazing, and they they really had a very difficult job at times, particularly keeping the heads of governments in line as they walked across the stage to give their 2 minutes of speech on the commitments to road safety. That was quite challenging, and they did a superb job in making sure there was continuity, I think, across the conference.
Great, thank you. What do you see as the actions that are going to come out of Marrakech? What are you doing in your own workplace? What are you seeing and hoping for your governments and the NGOs that you work with to be doing out of Marrakech? Who would like to start on that one?
I'll start. Yeah, from
Thank
the
you.
youth perspective, as you know, we launched the Global Statement. I think what we do from Marrakech is to promote the Global Statement to all stakeholders that we can do. We have more than 2,000 members from 100 countries, and we are trying to achieve endorsement from the government. We are trying to share young people prioritizations to achieve a safer mobility, how the safe mobility for everyone, everywhere, how streets designed for safety, and transport that heals, not harms. And yeah, it's our demand that has been included into the Global Youth Statement. So this is a powerful tool that we will be used to engage all the city and government decision makers to have youth in every stages that into their decision policy making processes, so we can have more inclusive, sustainable, and safer roads. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Estiara. Who else would like to speak to that one?
I think coming out of the conference, like I mentioned, that Global Alliance of NGOs review is certainly going to give transparency to governments and the commitments that they have made. We share the goal of halving road deaths and serious injuries by 2030. So I think the work coming out of the conference is very much going to be about ensuring that we are supporting governments with the evidence base that they need, and also continuing advocacy. So for iRAP, of course, we held meetings with 30 different countries, bilateral meetings, and we also signed those 5 MOUs I mentioned. So we will be continuing to work with all countries. So we're working with, we've assessed roads in more than 130 countries. So we'll continue to keep working with those stakeholder partners to engage them and equip them with the capacity building and tools and support resources that they need to keep the momentum going. I think really mentorship and collaboration is critical because not all countries have the same resources and access, but we all have something to offer, whether it be shared capacity that we can assist them with, or we can connect them. Sometimes just a simple connection can be wonderful to show another country what someone is doing, or a helpful mentor that might progress them on their journey. I think building on those case studies of success is going to be critical, helping countries to see, link them to where progress is being made and what can be learned from other countries. And also AI and technology, I think, is going to be an answer for us moving ahead. It's a rapidly growing field. I was in China last week and seeing all of the technological advances that they are doing in the area of traffic safety. So there is a lot that can be supported there. For example, for China taking that knowledge and those resources out to other countries, which I know they're very keen to do.
For me, Ingrid, it's about doing more and better in the space of working with organisations to improve their workplace road safety, or the culture of road safety in their workplaces. So providing the research evidence that's going to inform resources and getting those resources out to organisations. There's also an incredible power in bringing like organisations together. There's nothing like, well, I call it peer pressure, but it's not exactly that. But organisational benchmarking, when an organisation can see what another organisation is doing, that might be something that they can use as well. I think that's one of the things that the NRSPP has had considerable success in, with the utilities sector and the retail grocery sector come together and really challenge each other, sharing their challenges, but also sharing what works amongst like organisations. So that's one of the things, one of the messages I took away from the conference is we've got a good head start, but we need to do more, and we can do more.
Thanks.
From our side, we are also getting more and more technology and road safety together, and there's a tremendous overlap in everything that's developing. We are currently in discussions with Japan about their latest technology, just to name one. And like Judy also said, it's really part of what they are also doing. So really embedding technology and using all that rich data to make road safety outputs better. Then the other thing I've mentioned is just getting into blameless crash investigations more and more. But the other point, which is very important for us, and I think we spent a lot of time on that in the previous ACRS conference, Ingrid, was to target rural road safety, which is a big focus area in Australia, where your chances are, I think, 5 times higher to get injured on a rural road in comparison to an urban setting, where in Australia the urban road network is already at a high level, but then the moment you leave the big cities, we've got long stretches of rural roads with the speed limit defaulting to 100 to 110 km per hour. So that's really an area where we are trying to improve it and seeing what we can do, working with other councils and state governments to improve that situation.
You are mute.
That's an extremely good point, Estiara. I'll just give each of you 30 seconds with any final thoughts that you have, in the same order that we did the introductions. So Judy first.
Thank you. I think I've said many words already. But what I would really encourage to this audience, women in road safety, is that we really work together. What I have discovered in my journey with iRAP around the world is just that real power of working alongside one another, collaborating and sharing what we know, sharing what we can offer to others. Sometimes you might not think that's a lot, but in fact, you really can help to connect your knowledge with others to improve. And I think coming out of the ministerial, we do have a long way to go to reach that 2030 target of halving road deaths and injuries. But I think that collaboration is there, and many great resources and free trainings and free tools are there to support countries. So I really encourage any country organisation out there that's looking to make gains in road safety just to reach out and start asking some questions. And if you can have met someone at the conference, for example, or other conferences that you just particularly enjoyed the company of, expand your networks. Do reach out and see just what you can perhaps offer them or what they can offer you to mentor you on your journey.
Absolutely. Thanks, Judy. Estiara.
Thank you so much for having me today. I would like to emphasize that we need to ensure the youth participations and also the women participations, because we can't just be a participant. We need to be part into the discussions, and our participations as the women we'll have a more inclusive and safer roads and sustainable mobility. And I agree with what Judy said. The collaboration is the key. We need to work together. We need to do what can we do the best, what can we do in this uncertainty time. So yeah, working together is the key to achieve what we need to achieve to reach the 50% global reduction of the road traffic deaths by 2030. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Melanie.
Something that really meant a lot for me at this conference was getting together with the international outreach chapter. So I think that's really side part of the ACRS, which really works wonders in terms of finding a counterpart in another country that's maybe involved with a similar function, although the context is different. But there are always some kind of overlap, and you can support each other and help each other. And also when you see each other in the future at a conference, you can again maintain that relationship that you've started to build. So I think relationships and the international outreach is my two.
Thank you. And Jude.
Yes, I was just reflecting on the closing comments at the conference, and part of the wrap up was given by Etienne Krug, who leads the charge on road safety at WHO. And in a way, I was disheartened by a comment that he made, and we've already touched on this. And what he said was that road safety efforts are under threat around the world, and I think that was a sort of tangential reference to funding, particularly that's going to be withdrawn to WHO from the United States. But on the other hand, Etienne talked about the energy that comes with people meeting together, 5,000 people meeting together and talking about their road safety challenges and their road safety and solutions that work. So we talked about that bubble that you're in while you're at a conference, and there's no doubt about it. You are, you're in a bubble and you're energized. You've got like-minded people whom you're talking with, who are all on the same page. But it's difficult when you come back home, and so you need to have, I guess, strategies and ways of leveraging that excitement and motivation. And I liked your question towards the end there, Ingrid, about what are we going to do? What can we do? What are we going to do? What can all of us who are in the meeting do next to make sure that we move progressively towards the 2030 targets?
Absolutely, thank you. And we did have someone in the audience asking how can we continue to collaborate further. So if anyone does want to get in touch with anyone that's on the panel, if you just contact us here at the ACRS, then we can absolutely put you in touch with any of the panelists. So that's it from me, and I will hand back to Andrea to wrap things up. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you, Ingrid. Ladies, what a wonderful panel you are. I feel so motivated. I don't know where I'm going to start, but I've been jotting down notes. And as I've worked with a lot of local businesses and trucking companies across Australia, I'm pleased to know that these efforts will bear fruit. I'd just like to thank Ingrid Johnston for taking what I thought was a bit of a good idea and making it so sensational by inviting these wonderful women on our panel today. I'd like to thank Dr. Jude Charlton, Miss Judy Williams, Miss Estiara Elliziar, and Melanie Venter. And again, Melanie, thank you for stepping in at the last minute. That was wonderful. You have been absolutely sensational today, and I'm sure everyone has enjoyed it. For those of you who have friends that could not join us today, this has been recorded and will be available in a few weeks on the Australian College of Road Safety's website. Also, I encourage you to come to our conference in Perth and join the Women in Road Safety Network for our workshop. So thank you, ladies, and thank you to our guests today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.